Hello and welcome to A Deadly Silence. I'm your host, Larry Curtis, and while traditionally we do educational and informational programs on drug and alcohol awareness, today's special episode is going to focus on an important issue for the voters in the city of Brockton. On May 12th, the voters will be asked to go to the polls and vote either a yes or a no as it relates to a proposed destination resort casino to be developed on the Brockton Fairgrounds. My guest today is Bob Michaud. Bob is a traffic consultant for over 25 years now, working for MDM Transportation Consultants. And Bob is here to present to you as the voters of the city of Brockton the impact of a traffic study that has been coordinated not only with the Mass Department of Public Transportation, the Old Colony Planning Council, the city of Brockton, as well as Rush Street Gaming, which is the developer that is proposing this casino. With that being said, Bob, welcome to our show, and I'm sure you'll have some great information to share with our viewers out there as it relates to this important vote that's going to take place on May 12th.
Thank you, Larry, very much for the opportunity. What I'd like to do is really open by acknowledging that Brockton is a very special community, and this particular site that is going to be voted on May 12th is a unique site. My firm has been involved with over 20 potential sites for mass gaming and entertainment, which is the locally known entity of Rush Street Gaming. And this particular site, among all of the sites that we've looked at, really presents the best scenario for what mass gaming and entertainment is attempting to achieve. Really it comes down to two questions, and these are the two questions that my firm was asked at the very beginning of this process. And the first being, can a casino facility work at this particular site? Can it function?
The Brockton Fairgrounds.
The Brockton Fairgrounds.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And secondly, even if it functions and is accessible, does it fit in with the community from the perspective of transportation, safety, circulation, and traffic flow? And the first step to that process in answering those questions was to first understand what planning initiatives are currently underway, what are being planned by either the state or the regional planning agency, Old Colony Planning Council, to understand how this might fit in and how it might actually become part of the community. So in trying to answer those two questions, we began with looking at over 20 intersections that relate to how you would get from regional locations to the site. And they happen to be locations that were also evaluated either by Mass Department of Transportation or Old Colony Planning Council over the past number of years. And this map presents a picture of where that site, Brockton Fairgrounds, sits relative to the Route 24 corridor, in this case. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's just over a mile to the east of Route 24, so it's got good proximity to a regional highway system, and that's very important. And it also is located along a major arterial road known as Belmont Street. Mm-hmm.
Which is a state highway, Route 123.
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. Right. So the state owns and controls that section of Belmont Street all the way up through and including the West Street intersection, just past the plaza. Locally, of course, Forest Avenue is a very important connection as well, we discovered, and was the focus of a detailed study by Old Colony Planning Council. Okay. Because it's an important corridor for both vehicles and pedestrians, became a focal point of a regional study to identify safety issues, traffic flow issues that would need to be fixed or mitigated.
And would those safety issues, when you mention safety issues, be more toward the pedestrian foot traffic where we have an entrance to high school in that area?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a very important corridor as it relates to the neighborhoods. Yeah. You see from the aerial mapping, it becomes very obvious that it's very densely developed for residential uses. It also provides a convenient way to get to or from the east without necessarily using the downtown area, for instance. And for those reasons as well was a focus of Old Colony's study. So in our researching what is happening in Brockton, it became apparent to us that there are a number of very significant improvements that are already either in the construction process or are being planned. And this map would give you, in a puzzle type format, in a color-coded format, a picture of what's happening. So if you look at the Belmont Street corridor, which is here, and you see the green highlighted area, that is the portion of Belmont Street that is scheduled now for some $6.5 million of roadway improvement. And it entails new and upgraded signals at Manley Street, for instance, your first signal you come to off of Route 24, the VA hospital signal. It plans a new signal at Lorraine and Linwood Streets, and it also entails upgrades to the Angus Beaton Drive signal. In addition to either replacing the equipment or providing new equipment, there's a roadway widening that goes along with that $6.5 million package. That widening, in the case of Manley Street, for instance, will widen Belmont Street to provide exclusive, separate left turn lanes that will make it a lot easier for folks who are coming and going from Belmont Street to do so without backing vehicles behind them and causing queues and long delays. And likewise, the widening of the Manley Street approach from its current single lane to 2 lanes. When you look at the signal at VA Hospital, it will be coordinated with the Manley Street signal. So if you get a green at Manley, you'll get a green at VA Hospital. And when you look at the Lorraine-Linwood intersection, that today is unsignalized. The Linwood approach will be realigned opposite Lorraine. It will be signalized as well and coordinated to the high school signal. So that range of improvements is significant and costly, $6.5 million. But those improvements are not only intended to promote better traffic flow, they're also as equally important from the pedestrian's perspective. If you want to cross Belmont Street as a pedestrian, you'll be able to do so at a controlled location at multiple spots.
Locations.
And so you'll have a crosswalk, you'll have a push button, you'll have the ability to cross the street with having traffic in a stop position. The sidewalks on the edges of the road will be reconstructed. The edges of the road will now have shoulders on them, 4-foot wide shoulders. There are none today. And those types of improvements will make it easier to bicycle, for instance. It's one of the state's initiatives is to actually provide accommodations for people who don't want to drive, they want to bike or they want to walk. It's known as Complete Streets design philosophy. Now, what's also shown in this diagram is the orange section.
Can I just go back a minute and talk about the BAT buses? I mean, one of the concerns that we always see is a BAT bus stops in that right travel lane, you know, to stop and pick up its passengers. Is something being done about that as well?
Absolutely, and that's a great point, and I've experienced it a number of times as well. So BAT operates a very important service here in Brockton and in the area generally. And it's not uncommon to see a BAT bus pull into the lane just past the high school and to block traffic. So you're essentially blocking an entire lane of traffic for a bus. Part of the improvements that are scheduled are to provide a bus pullout. So a BAT bus can actually pull out of the travel lane and allow for continuous traffic flow, less likelihood of backing vehicles into the crosswalks and things like that.
Great, fantastic.
So that's part of the story. Another $4 million of funds have been earmarked for an extension of those improvements shown in green to include 3 additional signalized intersections, the West Street, Plaza Drive intersection, the Belmont Street, Forest Avenue intersection, and the West Street intersection at Belmont Street. As is the case in the green, that improvement will involve widening of the roadway for shoulders, new sidewalks, and enhancements and upgrades to the 3 signals that exist there. That is not scheduled to happen in a year or 2 years. It's earmarked for $4 million. It's in design at the state level currently. And finally, what's shown in blue are a series of recommendations that were identified by Old Colony Planning Council that entail numerous things. Most important among them, perhaps, is the introduction of a new traffic signal at the high school driveway, the Memorial Drive.
Okay, on Forest Avenue.
Correct. And the importance of that relates to getting students safely from one side of Forest Avenue to the other with a crosswalk, pedestrian push-button control, new sidewalks, and the ability to get vehicles, meaning student vehicles, staff vehicles, school buses, into and out of the high school safely and more efficiently than currently occurs. In addition to that improvement, there are a series of recommendations that involve upgrading the signals that exist at Ash Street, at Manamet, and at Warren Avenue. Right? Three separate locations. The signals there are very outdated. The pedestrian sidewalks, the crossings are outdated or non-existent, need to be fixed. And likewise, in addition to those, the idea of placing a new signal at Main Street at the very end of Forest Avenue. It's very difficult today to make a movement out of Forest Avenue onto Main Street. And if you're a pedestrian, very, very difficult to cross. Main Street there, or Forest Avenue for that matter. And finally, the combination of where West Street meets Forest Avenue today really is two stop signs, and it's very confusing, it's very inefficient, it's a high crash location, it's not conducive to pedestrians whatsoever, and was also a focal point of recommendations. Among those recommendations was the idea of combining all of those roads into a common roundabout feature that would make it easier to travel and safer, and would also accommodate pedestrians. And so those range of improvements are identified but not funded, and present a very important piece of the puzzle, if you will, in improving traffic flow, pedestrian safety, pedestrian circulation in the area.
So as we look at this particular plan that we have in front of us now, as you mentioned, the green section has been identified, funding has been approved, and there'll be construction at some point in the future going forward.
That's correct.
The yellow section is obviously a recommendation to take it all the way up, further up Belmont Street to just up close to Torrey Street.
Correct.
And then they additionally recognize what was happening in the blue section as it relates coming down from what I call the Bermuda Triangle at Forest and West, where the stop signs are, and heading, in this case, all the way out to Main Street, and improving the signals, to ensure pedestrian safety from that perspective all the way around.
That's correct. And what's interesting is that the site really is at the center of all of those initiatives and recommendations, and really led us to take a close look at how a casino use in this particular location could accelerate some of those improvements and integrate itself as part of the community and provide a benefit. And our conclusion, having studied the 20-plus locations, understanding what is being proposed, what's in process right now, is that yes, this site, if it were developed for a casino, would absolutely provide the opportunity, given this range of improvements, to not only improve traffic conditions in Brockton after the casino is up and running relative to today, but also the pedestrian environment, and as importantly, the pedestrian environment, particularly because of the relationship and where the site is located to many generators like the high school, for instance.
One of the concerns that we always hear out there is that, while the funding is available for the first part of the presentation here in the green, obviously the yellow and the blue funding, they have identified a cost element to that, but the funding is not necessarily available through normal channels, which would be local, state, or federal funding potentially that would become available, and that could be a number of years out potentially, as we see with funding sources within the state and the federal government.
Right.
How does the development of resort destination casino play into making this happen going forward?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that is best answered by saying that in order for this facility to answer the first question, can we get this facility to work? And secondly, can we fit in well with the community in which we're a neighbor and a part of? The answer is yes on both fronts, because this proponent, this developer, is willing to front some $8.5 million to implement what's shown in the blue.
In addition to the 6.5 that's already earmarked by the Department of Transportation.
That's correct. And a portion of that $8.5 million will also be used to upgrade the three signals that are part of a longer-term initiative
Okay.
by the state to improve the Belmont Street quarter generally. So it's a substantial package that under any other development scenario would not happen.
Okay.
We are comfortable that a casino can operate efficiently here, and that it also provides and leverages and accelerates opportunities to improve pedestrian environment and other aspects of local travel along Forest Avenue corridor.
So how would it look going forward if if this opportunity were to pass and become reality for the city of Brockton?
Well, these improvements, those in green, those in blue, and the pieces that involve the $1 million or so that involve the signals on Belmont Street they'd need to be in place and would be in place as part of this casino opening, and would really take what would ordinarily be a decades-long process to try to get these built, and would compress that into essentially a 2 to 3 year process.
2 to 3 year process, okay.
And with guaranteed private funding. To illustrate the point, the improvements that are now funded and underway along Belmont Street, the ones that are shown in green, were first studied in 2007, 8, 9, right? The mid-2000s. And now are only going into construction, and that process is about 2 years away from being completed. So even for projects that have targeted state funding and meet the requirements of state funding, it's still a lengthy process.
A lengthy process, okay.
Right.
You mentioned about the siting of the facility itself and how it blends in with the neighborhood. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yes, there was a lot of discussion among the team as to how to fit the project onto the property in a way that was respectful to their abutting uses. And of course, to the east, that includes a densely developed residential neighborhood along Forest Avenue. To the west and south involves the stadium, the high school, and various commercial uses as well. And in that regard, there was a conscious effort to site the casino building itself in a way that's central to the property, and to provide a hotel component that is more proximate to where Belmont Street is, and to provide a garage structure that is located on the south side of that building. What's interesting about that design is that unlike the current zoning allowances where you could build buildings within 20 feet of property lines, that design has a minimum setback from the residential neighborhood property line, for instance, of 80 feet. And in fact, it averages more than 100 feet, or more than 5 times what the requirement is locally, out of respect for the adjoining neighborhood. And on the high school side, you'll see that the program involves a landscape berm feature, significant buffer, a pond feature, and substantial landscaping, all of which will give a view from where you'd be exiting from Memorial Drive of a beautifully landscaped hillside with a pond, not a massive structured casino. So it's tastefully done and done purposely to provide an experience to the patron that is separate from any other land use and that respects its neighbors.
And that seems to be the same philosophy going along Thurber Avenue, which is probably the more densely populated side of the fairground today.
That's right. In fact, one of the design principles as well was how are people going to get to and from this facility? Will that affect local neighborhood streets or not? And that's a very important consideration. It really answers the second question of can we fit in with the community? Will we introduce something that causes issues in the community? I'm pleased to say that we've done a very detailed assessment of where patrons would be coming from to get here. This is a facility that you would visit from many communities regionally, and the best and easiest and most direct way to get here is going to be along the Belmont Street corridor from Route 24. And we know that 8 out of every 10 trips that will be made and generated by this use will be oriented to Route 24. not local neighborhood streets. And the reason it will be most efficient to get there from Route 24 and Belmont Street is because of the range of improvements that are now funded and underway, being constructed, or that will be underway and constructed by this proponent. So if you look at how the site is oriented, and you're coming from Belmont Street, your first opportunity to get into this property is the West Street connection to Forest Avenue.
Yep.
And there's been some purposeful design that involves widening out Forest Avenue from what it is today, which is 2 lanes.
2 lanes, 1 way each. Yep.
Correct, to 4 lanes.
Okay.
Those 4 lanes will not only allow for vehicle travel, but will also include shoulders, right? 4-foot shoulders, just like are being designed and built on Belmont Street.
Now, the widening of Forest Avenue, is that property being taken on the fairground side of Forest Avenue, or is it encroaching upon the commercial side?
There is no encroachment whatsoever on privately owned and controlled property, other than property that is owned and controlled by this developer.
Okay.
So any of the widening on Forest Avenue or any of the other roadway improvements, which I'll discuss shortly, would be taken from the property of the fairground
side. Okay.
Exactly.
Very nice.
So there's really no impact to any businesses in the area or privately controlled properties. So a major feature was to widen Forest Avenue to facilitate that movement from Belmont Street into the property fairly directly. And you'll see that part of the initiative here is to have a separate driveway for this casino, and it is better shown on this particular diagram. So you'll see that this is the West Street connection onto Forest Avenue. There'll be a new traffic signal placed between Belmont Street and where the Memorial Drive High School driveway is located. It's a separate location. It will be controlled by a signal, and will also provide pedestrian crossings that are controlled via the signal. In addition, you'll see that, again, an Old Colony Planning Council recommendation to signalize Memorial Drive as a separate location. That is part of this plan. So there'll be a separate signal there, also with pedestrian crossing capability Forest Avenue. There is a second means of access into the property. There will be a realignment of this section of West Street. Today, that section is a relatively narrow roadway. It's a single lane in each direction. It comes in at a very sharp angle to Belmont Street. It will be widened to a 4-lane road. It will be realigned with Belmont Street, and it will incorporate a new unsignalized driveway that will provide more direct access into the hotel component, for instance.
Okay.
So if you're coming from Route 24 and you're on West Street, you'll be able to get in directly from either Forest Avenue or via West Street.
Now, right where that roundabout is right now, that green circle there, that's kind of a proposed enhancement to that particular area as well to help the flow of traffic versus the triangle stop signs?
Yes, and this type of feature, this was actually identified as one of the recommended actions in the Old Colony study. It was one of a number of recommendations. Various options were evaluated. This feature is the type of design that the state, quite frankly, prefers as an option over placing a new signal, for instance. And in this context, it allows for people to either go into this driveway or to reverse direction to come back up to Belmont Street, or to simply continue through on Forest Avenue without ever having to stop. It's a very important design feature, and one that's being adopted very often, quite frankly, by the state at this point.
One of the concerns that the residents speaking a lot about is that they believe that a development of this magnitude is going to bring more traffic into the Belmont Street corridor than what's already existing there. Can you draw a correlation between what's happening now, what will happen in relationship to the development's traffic versus if a different commercial entity went into there?
Certainly. We are actually in the process of filing environmental filings with the state, and as part of that process, we're obligated to look at alternative development scenarios for a property. And we know that the Carney family has publicly acknowledged that this question isn't a question of whether this property will be developed or not. This is a function or a question of whether the development will be a casino or a commercial development at this point. The casino use is unlike most entertainment type venues. It's not like a Red Sox game or a football game. It really draws traffic over an extended period of time. It does not have a surge like a baseball game. Tends to have its highest levels of activity during what we'd call off hours, nighttime periods. If you look at a typical casino operation on a Monday through Thursday, it generates very low traffic volumes, particularly during weekday morning hours until sometime in the afternoon, where it starts to gradually increase in activity into the nighttime hours. On a Friday evening, it has higher levels of activity at about 6 o'clock and later, and same thing for Saturday evenings, 6 o'clock and later. Relative to a commercial use of the property, you could build some 386,000 square feet of commercial use on this property. That could involve super box stores, home improvement stores, and other type of similar retail venues. Those type of venues, unlike a casino, actually generate more traffic than a casino during hours in the morning, the afternoon, commuter hours, almost on a 2-to-1 basis, frankly. So they have more impact. Also important to know that commercial use of the property will draw more traffic from the neighborhoods.
Coming in,
yeah,
like
sure.
That's a Walmart or a Target superstore, whatever. It's going to draw from within the neighborhoods of the city as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and so commercial use would have a greater effect on local neighborhood streets, whereas a casino, because it's a regional facility, will be drawing its traffic and its impacts from regional routes, not neighborhood streets.
We've got about a minute left, so I need to ask you in 30 seconds or less, is the two questions you asked at the beginning of the show, are they answerable to the developers of this particular project?
Yes, and the developers would not be willing to spend some $650 million on a project without a reassurance that those two questions were not yes.
And in the event that on May 12th the voters go to the polls and they vote yes for this development to move forward, and ultimately a license is granted by the Mass Gaming Commission for a development resort destination casino to be built on the Brockton Fairgrounds, then literally within the next 3 years of completion of the planning and construction phases, these improvements can be in place to help make that investment work, not only for the developer, but also for the city of Brockton.
Absolutely, and only under that scenario.
Right, only under that scenario. Well, we've reached the end of our time, and I want to thank Bob for coming in and sharing with us his findings, and I hope that you as voters out there take some time to review this information. You can contact, this information will be available on the website at www.yesforbrockton. It will also be available on Brockton Cable Access, and thanks to Brockton Cable Access for allowing us this time, and a show of Deadly Silence for giving us the time slot. And we'll also, if you need any further information, feel free to call 774-776-2400. On behalf of all of us, thank you very much.